I've got two options for the answer for this. One that makes me sound ridiculously weird and geeky, a bit like earlier on in this interview. In for a penny, in for a pound. Right.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello, my name is Ellie Dodds and I'm co-presenter. Today Jo is interviewing Alexis Kingsbury of Making Greatness. Jo first met our guest Alexis Kingsbury at an HR conference 3 years ago where he was exhibiting and she was speaking. They joined the conference organisers at the end of the day for drinks, and suffice to say that she left her laptop on the train on the way home amongst other traumas. So you can imagine that a good evening was had by all, apart from maybe Daddy and me, who had to go and pick up Jo from a different station as she also fell asleep on the train and missed her stop. In her defence, it had been a very long day, slightly stressful day, as she only had 2 days to prepare a new presentation for the event. Anyway, Alexis and Jo got on really well that day and have kept in touch since, including Alexis inviting Jo to co-host a webinar with him this summer, so she's especially pleased to have him on her podcast now too. Alexis is a business consultant and entrepreneur. Through his businesses and consultant work, Alexis has worked with thousands of companies around the world to help them improve individual and team performance. He currently runs 3 businesses, including Making Greatness, an online coaching and training business that helps businesses to build happy, high-performing teams where employees are growing and striving for greatness. SpiderGap, an employee-friendly 360-degree feedback tool that has quickly risen to become the #1 rated 360 solution on software review site. Captura, Bridging Insight Limited, a management consultancy that helps large companies improve the ways in which teams within and across organisations work together. You can contact him via Twitter at Alexis Kingsbury or email alexis@makinggreatness.com. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Alexis Kingsbury of Making Greatness. Hello Alexis, thanks for joining me.
Hi there, Jo. My pleasure.
Good to have you here, and I don't know why I'm going to tell everybody this, but this is the first one we're doing where we can actually see each other as we're speaking, so it's a bit of a test, a little trial to see if it makes any difference. So it may or may not happen again, so we'll see how we get on. So start by telling me a bit about you, what you do and where you do it.
Sure. So I run 3 different companies. One's a consultancy called Bridging Insight. Another's an online software tool, which is a 360 feedback tool called SpiderGap. And I have a online coaching and training business that you mentioned, which is Making Greatness. For all those businesses, there's a lot of work that I'm able to do remotely, and so I work from home most of the time, and occasionally from the odd coffee shop or the wine bar that's relatively recently opened in my hometown, which has now got fibre optic broadband, which is excellent.
Oh, brilliant! I'm liking the sound of that. I must look out for my own wine bar.
Yeah, and People de Pinot, which is even more excellent. And so I occasionally I visit clients or go and speak at conferences or run training events on particular sites. But most of my work, the vast majority, is done remotely, and so I work from home.
Mm-hmm. And so, what's the sort of type of work that you're doing? So obviously sometimes you are live and with people in their own offices, but when you're working from the coffee shop or the wine bar or your office, what sort of things are you doing?
So there's a real mix by virtue of being a business owner in the sense that you do have to do actual work with clients. So whether it's writing some presentation that I'm going to deliver, or whether it's writing a script for a video I'm going to record. But then there's also the kind of business activities as well. So whether it's creating a marketing campaign and identifying the copy that's going to be for some advert, or as you know, planning a webinar that we did on engaging and developing millennial talent that you co-hosted me with me back in August.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a huge variety of things that I have to do on a sort of day-to-day basis to help me achieve the goals. I do also have some lighting equipment here and some cameras and microphones and so on. So I can do some video recording, particularly of me in front of a whiteboard trying to explain something as best I can. So I even do that from home as well.
Yes, yeah. That's something I get put off with all the time. I keep thinking I need to do more video, but I'm too self-critical for video. Live is fine. If someone else is recording me, it's fine. But if I'm doing it myself, nightmare. Although we have tried Periscope. Little Dodsy was desperate to try, so we gave it a go, which was quite entertaining.
Periscope's very new and very exciting. I think I've seen a few examples where it looks like it might be a killer app, but there seems to be a lot of people going onto it and going, so what's all this about then? This all seems pointless. And I try and remind them that that's what everyone said about Twitter about 5 years ago. It's like it then did evolve.
That's true, yeah. And of course you saw the Engage for Success team doing Morris dancing this week on Periscope, didn't you? Which was quite exciting.
Yeah, that's something that I can't unwatch. No, it was very entertaining. Everyone looked like they're having a lot of fun and indeed creating a great team spirit. And it was lovely to be able to share that live with people via Periscope. So that's really cool. And no, I did enjoy that.
So tell us a bit about what you do to sort of set your day up. Do you have a morning routine? Do you have certain things that you do every day to sort of get going, or is it all a bit more haphazard, as mine is tending to be at the moment, I have to admit?
No, I'm a bit of a geek for, there's a book called Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, which essentially sets out 6 activities for you to do every morning. So getting up early and starting off by some silence and possibly meditation, although that's not quite my style. A bit of affirmations, some visualization, some scribing, including planning your day, a bit of physical exercise, and some personal development, so listening to audiobooks or whatever. So I do prescribe to that. I do use that as often as I can, and I like the way that Hal describes it, which is that your life is essentially made up of days, and you have the opportunity in the morning to set your rudder for that day, and therefore the rudder for your entire life. And so by taking that time in the morning to focus on what's most important, to remind you of your goals, to align your activities for the day against those, and to do some things like physical exercise and personal development that help you to expand your thinking a bit more, that can have a positive impact on the rest of what you do. And I've certainly found that's benefited me. I haven't always done it in the form of the Hal Elrod Miracle Morning style, but I've always done it or at least I've certainly done it in some form or another in the last 4 years, but only recently picked up the Miracle Morning model. But yeah, so as a result, I do get up early as much as I can before my 2-year-old son starts squawking and requires looking after.
I was going to say, what time does early mean to do that? Because I'm lucky. Little Dodsy never got up early. Like 8 o'clock was early for her.
Wow.
But if you're talking 6:30 and you've got to get up before that.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying. So this morning he woke up at 6:30. I got out of bed at 5:30. So that gave me a good hour to do that routine in a proper way. It is possible to do a shorter version, and so anyone listening that thinks, oh no, I couldn't do a 5:30, I could dedicate 15 minutes. then I'd recommend at least starting with that. But I find it really useful to do it properly. But then I've always been a bit of an early riser, so as long as my son doesn't have a nightmarish night, I generally wake up naturally about 5:30 anyway. But I do have other people in my network who find it much harder to get up, but feel amazing having done so.
Yeah. So 2 questions on that. How do you make that happen if you are going off to a client or whatever? Do you just have to get up even earlier, or does it become the 15-minute version?
That does make it harder, and so both of those are options. Either deciding that 4:30 then, although that's definitely not the preferred one. doing a shortened one often is. What I also do is, particularly if I'm having to travel anyway, then that means that certainly in the car I'm able to listen to audiobooks, so able to get the personal development in there. I haven't yet started doing press-ups on the train, but I can at least do the visualization and scribing part. So as long as I can get some of that physical exercise before I go. Having said all of that, I do tend to avoid having to do the early mornings with a client, not because I shun early mornings, because as discussed, that isn't, I actually quite like getting up early. It's more about the fact that the time wasted stuck in traffic or on packed tube trains or on trains where you can't sit down and have a table to work at, I just find completely wasted. So as much as possible, I arrange client workshops and so on to start at about 11, which gives plenty of time to get down at a time that isn't rush hour. And so I do avoid that wherever possible. But if I can't, then make it shorter, get up earlier, don't do it at all, feel rubbish. those are all options.
So the second question then is what you do the night before. Do you have to make sure you're in bed by a certain time to enable you to get up, and do you have a certain routine to enable that to happen? Or from my own personal experience, I'm not a morning person anyway, so my tendency is to want to stay up late. So to go to bed at a reasonable time is really hard. But if you're an early riser, that's normally not so much the case. But is that true, or is that is that just me feeling inadequate? And
perhaps when I was quite a bit younger, I used to be one of those people that would burn the candle at both ends and have absolutely no problem doing so. Since starting our family, that's changed a bit, and I'm definitely impacted more by that. But I am very fortunate in the fact that I have the opposite of an alarm clock. At about 9 p.m. I get this gentle noise that says, "Right, I'm really tired. I think I'm going to go to bed, darling." And my wife goes to bed, and I normally follow. So yeah, I mean the fact that my wife's pretty pregnant at the moment accentuates that, makes that even earlier. Sometimes 8:30. But yeah, I think I try, partly because I know how good it is for me in the morning. I've got better at thinking, no, I will go to bed early or earlier, and I've got it as part of my visioning in the morning that I make sure that I have gone to bed before 11. Having said that, you probably know from seeing me at conference drinks and so on, I tend to be one of the last people standing. So when I do get the opportunity to properly socialise and be out, I'm last one on the dance floor, and and then just. Yeah, you can just see it in my face the morning afterwards. Yes,
yeah. So do you find it easy to switch off? Or, my brain sort of runs so fast at night that I have to read before I go to sleep, and little Dozzy has to do the same, otherwise I just can't sleep. So do you have that issue, or does it all sort of naturally happen?
Yeah.
Because you got up so early.
Yeah, shattered, just collapse. I'm generally not very good at switching off at all, and so it's the kind of thing that my wife might complain that most 99% of what I discuss and I think about and so on is my work, but it's because I'm passionate about it and I love it. It's not I'm never moaning about it. I'm always talking about stuff that excites me. So naturally, I think that does have an impact of if you going to sleep and thinking, I wonder what would happen if I did this, and I've got this idea. However, I think perhaps some of the activities that I do in the afternoon, and particularly what I do with my work day, is that I tend to properly finish when my wife and son return home at about 6 p.m. And I don't tend to do the, oh, well, I'll stop work, go and have dinner with them, and then go back to work, and then go to bed kind of thing, which I think I've done previously, and that does set my brain going, and that is then when my wife might moan that I seem to be lying in bed and just like when you got someone like next to you where they're like pretending to sleep, but they're so actively pretending to sleep that you can feel it. So as a result, I tend to avoid that. I think tiredness helps. Yeah, two-year-old definitely helps me get to sleep as quickly as I can in the evenings.
Yeah.
But there are some other strategies that I use to try and get to sleep more quickly. Particularly sort of taking my thinking off the day-to-day. So rather than thinking about the day that I've just had and so on, I did this thing that's really geeky that I learned from, I think it's the last chapter of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which is a brilliant book. Highly recommend it to anyone. What's quite weird about it is it's basically 12 chapters of the same concept being described in different ways to get you to realise the secret and the message behind it. And then the last chapter is him basically telling you something quite odd, which I started doing and quite like it, which is to invent a council of people who you would almost like as coaches, alive or dead, that you know enough, perhaps by reading their autobiographies or knowing them through history or whatever, that you can almost give yourself advice through their lens.
Right. And
so what I do is I imagine being at essentially a meeting with those people, and briefly attempting to describe my biggest challenge or a question that I've got, and then trying to think about how each of them would answer it. More often than not, I'm asleep before two of them have answered. so I can't vouch for it yet as being an amazing tool like Napoleon Hill describes for helping you to overcome those answers. But as a way of getting to sleep, it's amazing.
Go on, I've got to ask you, can you reveal one or two of those people?
Yeah, I can. So Richard Branson tends to get to speak first. Robert Kiyosaki from Rich Dad Poor Dad is also in there. And then there's a few others that people are less likely to know that are either people that already coach me or whatever. I tend to pick people who have a very strong lens on the world, and as a result, I feel like I could accurately represent their thoughts.
Yes.
To be honest, I partly picked it up because as a consultant and a coach, I am regularly asked for my advice to various businesses and business leaders on what to do, and I'm good at it. They use the advice, they get great results, and I realised that often I wasn't taking my own advice, and that sometimes I wasn't even giving myself an opportunity to think about what that advice would be, and so I found that this is an effective way of me essentially giving myself that perspective in a way that doesn't feel completely mental.
I like it as a concept.
It's slightly mental, and so I feel slightly concerned about sharing this publicly.
I was going to say, you don't admit it to everybody. Well, I'll make you feel much better because that sounds very intellectual and very helpful. When I'm really struggling to get to sleep, I go back and try and remember all the store numbers at Staples. When I used to be the HR manager there, when I started there were 7 stores, and when I left there were 40. So we opened a lot of stores in 3 years. So I go through the list going, right, store 1 was whatever, store 2 was Swansea, store 3 was Cambridge, store 4 was... And then I fall asleep. It's a bit like counting sheep, but it's retail stores.
Wow. Yeah,
so that makes yours sound really intellectual and impressive now.
Well, if I didn't fall asleep during halfway through Robert Kiyosaki's explanation of what I should be doing next, yes.
A bit more impressive. Yeah, good point. Excellent. So it sounds like with 3 businesses to run that managing your time is really key, as it is for lots of us who work from home. So how do you do that? Have you got particular strategies? I'm sure you have. You're going to say it's a bit geeky, but I'm sure that's going to come out again in the answer.
Yeah, that's almost going to be the theme of this particular interview, isn't it? It's a bit geeky. So it is. So part of it comes out through my morning ritual of identifying what are my goals, reminding myself of what I'm trying to achieve. So, for example, for Making Greatness specifically, and I have different goals for different businesses. For that business, it's about helping people to love their work, and specifically, I want to help 1 million people to help their work through various avenues, and so that helps me to then identify what could I meaningfully do today, this week, this month to achieve that. And this isn't something I just plan on a daily basis. This is something that I'm, obviously think more long term, and then I'm reviewing it in the morning and working out, okay, so what does that mean for today? And then I relentlessly prioritize my time. I'm a big believer in the power of relative prioritization. So where I've used a lot of time management techniques, they're kind of urgent, important, not urgent kind of, models, and found that the only one that really works for me is, essentially a to-do list, but a prioritized to-do list of, if I do nothing else today, this is the thing that must happen. And then what's number 2, what's number 3, and what's number 4. And so I tend to mind map that out, use it on my iPad in the morning, and then I'll probably then look at my calendar, work out what I've got arranged and sort of from previous days, and then block out time to do the things that are on my list. So that I might say, okay, that's probably it's a quick job, it's 15 minutes, pop that in, 45 minutes on that, an hour and a half on that, and I'll block out the day so I know exactly what I should be doing throughout the day, and then as much as possible keep to that, and that helps me manage my time. It helps manage my time because it means that the activities I'm doing are based on a prioritization, but it also helps me because it reduces my stress, because I know that I've already decided what I should be doing, and therefore I don't get that guilt feeling where you feel like you could probably be better using your time, and so right now you're doing this, and you start to feel guilty. And then you get to the end of the day and you're like, well, I now feel even more guilty because the one thing that I did plan on doing, or even if I didn't think that was then the most important, I've still not done that one. So I find that that's most effective. I won't see, it's not, I don't have every day all perfect and it all lines up like that, but it allows me to let myself off the hook. It also allows me to identify if there are things that drop off the bottom of the list and don't get done. I can then make a decision as to whether they should happen tomorrow or not at all or whatever. So that's probably how I really go about my time management. Yeah,
I think the time blocking is really interesting. It's not something I'm very good at, and I was planning far too much to do. And when you talk about the guilt thing, this week on Monday randomly, instead of thinking of a better way of doing it, I decided that in between working I was going to do lots of cooking, so that at the end of the day, even if I was frustrated about things I hadn't done, I'd have lots of food to show for it. And it worked. Monday felt like a really good day.
No work done, but 1,000 sausage rolls. Exactly.
No, I did get some work done as well, but I sort of felt like I had something to show for it at the end, whereas often I get to the end and I can't really see what I've done, but I know I've done lots of stuff that's been needed, but on this occasion we could actually eat dinner with lots of nice stuff as well.
Yeah, well, I'll have to try that because I believe in not knocking it till you try it. It sounds like it's probably not going to help my diet, but
yeah,
it sounds fun. I should also I just thought of one other technique that I highly recommend to people is something that Brian Tracy advocates, which is a concept he calls "eat that frog."
Yes.
The concept comes from the idea of if you were to eat a whole live frog in the morning, it's the worst thing that you'll have to do that day, and the rest of the day feels comparatively easy and so on. And actually, the best time, if you're going to eat a frog, the best time is to do it first thing in the morning rather than think about it all day. And the way that translates is that when you're coming up with your prioritization list, identify the thing that is the most important, it would have the most impact on achieving your goal, but you've probably put it off because it feels so scary or it's not something you enjoy or whatever. And try and put that at the top of your list, so that, because when you do that, the rest of the day will feel a lot easier. And secondly, you know, when you do get to the end of the day and you're surrounded by 1,000 sausage rolls, at least you'll have done that other major task that was top of the list as well, rather than I've updated my social media profile, I've tweeted a few people, I've answered my emails, I've done this. What a productive day! I just wish any of that, progressed my life.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead, doing at least one task that genuinely will do that right at the beginning of the day has an amazing impact on the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Never mind the impact of having done the job.
Definitely. I wonder why I came up with a frog. There could have been a whole host of other things you could have eaten that would have been horrible.
I can only assume that he's eaten a frog and knows it's awful.
Yeah, maybe so. It's funny you mention him. I was listening to a podcast with him on only yesterday where he was talking about eat the frog. So that was interesting. And just to be clear with everybody, I wasn't making sausage rolls on Monday. I was making very healthy food, including boiling eggs and what was the other thing that was in for snacks? Cooking sausages and boiling eggs, so that we had healthy snacks instead of, and these are good gluten-free sausages, rather than rubbish. Anyway.
Oh, very good. Well, that's entirely the opposite approach to how I imagined me doing.
You thought it'd be cakes and things. I did make a cake actually, but it was a non-sugar one. It was very, very nice, non-gluten and all that sort of stuff. So I'm a bit frightened to ask the next question, as we mentioned geek a few times. But what about apps or tools that you would recommend? This is where we're going to get really technical, isn't it?
Surprisingly, probably not. I think because I am a geek, and I started my first online business when I was 13. I've always loved technology. I've always loved learning about software and apps and websites and whatever. But I'm a big believer in not using technology for the sake of it. So as a result, my actual use of apps tends to reduce down quite quickly as I either find them useful or not. I have an iPhone 6, I have an iPad Air, I have a MacBook Pro, so I'm clearly an Apple geek. But I find that it helps that I'm integrated across all those devices. There's very little switch over time. I'm able to use them in very similar ways. iThoughts is probably the best app and most powerful app that I use, and it's the one that I get asked about most often when I'm at conferences, because I take all my notes into iThoughts, which is a mind mapping application.
Right.
I put all my notes into there, all my actions, etc. It helps that I also have my goals and my annual priorities and my daily plan and my daily, my miracle morning stuff all in there as well. So if I come up with an idea, I can just switch map and pop it in. And so a lot of people look over my shoulder and say, "Oh, what's that?" And I literally ended up having to draft a template email in Google so that I could respond to it. Literally in one conference, I got asked 10 times. So iThoughts, highly recommended. I think it's about $7.99, but it's definitely worth it. I've tried loads of mind mapping applications. It's the best.
Yeah.
For my fitness, I track using MyFitnessPal.
Yep.
Which I use for tracking all my meals, for tracking calories, and also I sort of tend to put in what exercise I've done as well, so I can sort of keep a track on am I doing the stuff I plan to do.
Yeah.
I then have specific apps on my iPhone and iPad relating to my businesses. So, for example, I have a WordPress app which I use for recording blog ideas and actually sometimes writing full blogs straight in. I have there's an application called Intercom, which is used by my software business for all of our support ticketing, so I can keep an eye on what conversations people are having. My accounting solution, I have an app for that as well. So, all my bank accounts, I have apps for. It's rare that there isn't an application that I'm not using for those. Big user of social media as well, particularly Twitter. So I use that. I used to use Buffer to sort of schedule to try and separate my thoughts out throughout the day via Twitter.
Yep.
So quite a few applications. Does that sort of cover?
Yes, and it didn't sound too geeky. It was fine.
Cool.
We got away with it then. talked about MyFitnessPal and exercise. What do you do to keep healthy? And we talked about sausage rolls.
Yeah, so it's probably only 2 or 3 months before now that I made a proper decision that I was going to get myself fit, because my weight has always been an issue for me. It's always something I've struggled to control. It's not like it's just ballooned all the time, but it's just got slightly more and slightly more and slightly more. And particularly when I've got busier. Baby weight. Yeah, it's just old baby weight. So I've struggled a bit with that, and it's not like I'm crazy obese or anything like that. It's just that I want to feel fitter, and I've tended to put it off and say, oh well, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm really busy, I've got loads of work projects and whatever, so I'll do it afterwards when they're successful. And I've started to realise that it doesn't work that way. You kind of have to balance across all of them, and find a balance that doesn't feel like you're sacrificing. Find a balance that actually feels like you've designed it. You've designed your day. Miracle Morning is a great example of where I've designed that time into my day. It allows me to feel like I've been really productive before I then have breakfast with my son and feed him while my wife gets ready for work. That's a designed part of my day that allows me to have really good family time. And so in the same way, part of my Miracle Morning includes some press-ups and sit-ups, and I've done more leg raises and all this kind of stuff. But also I made the decision to get a personal trainer. I'd signed up with some gyms before and just found it pointless, because the only thing that was reducing was my bank balance. Whereas when I got a personal trainer, in an hour's session, I get worked so hard that on at least one occasion I've pretty much fainted. I would never work myself that hard in a gym.
Funny that.
And yet it feels brilliant. At the end of it, I'm like, yeah, that was that was really, really, really good and really powerful, and I can feel a difference for a couple of days afterwards. And it supported, along with tracking calories and doing the exercise in the mornings, I have been losing £1 a week. But different people have different goals. People sometimes ask me, "Oh, what's the weight you want to get to?" That's not the way that my goal's set up. My goal is to lose £1 a week until I go, yep, that's probably where I want to keep it. And believe me, I won't struggle to do that. But I think what's worked best there is baking it into my life. It's not trying to have it as this crazy add-on and decide, oh well, I'm gonna run in the mornings even though I don't want to, or I'm going to I'm going to go to the gym on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but then feel fed up that I'm not seeing my family. Instead, it's built into my life so that it's just part of it now. For example, that this afternoon I've got a personal training session. It's an hour. I've got about half an hour of travel either side of that. I'll listen to personal development while I'm traveling. But I've accepted that time is coming out of my work time. It's my day, rather than out of my evenings or out of my mornings.
I think, that's one of the things that quite often we talk to people who have their own businesses and work from home, that it's actually quite a transition to realise that you can do stuff in the day, because it's so sort of hardwired that it's a working day, especially if you've got a partner who's working as well, that you sort of feel like you're living it up a bit by going and doing something that doesn't involve work. But actually, as you say, the whole point, well, not the whole point, but one of the reasons we do what we do is to give us that flexibility to make those things all fit together in the right way for our lives. And we don't always start in that way, do we? Because we think that we've got to do 9 to 5 work, have a lunch break.
And I actually think, in retrospect, I think you have to start off that way. I think because otherwise, if you put having a work-life balance as being the goal at the end of successful business, entrepreneurship, or whatever, you'd be surprised that you'll never get there. Partly because, as I think it might be Keith Cunningham, or it's certainly mentioned in Hal Elrod's book, one of the things that you often need for business success is go for a run or have a bit of exercise because it clears your head and so on. And so it's actually part of a healthy process of achieving a success. The other thing is it takes the pressure off, because if you're already having a good work-life balance and seeing your kids and spending time with your partner and you're treating your health effectively and so on, it nearly doesn't matter whether your business ends up being successful.
Yes.
Rather than if you're planning on doing that after getting your business successful, everything is pinned on that. Not just financial security, everything. Your life, your happiness. And indeed, there are plenty of, we all know people that are either currently sacrificing that. There's a guy that's in my coaching group. His kids, his girls are now 13 and 15, and basically he's spent their entire life up to now working really hard on the businesses so that he could get to a point where he could spend time with them.
Yeah.
And now he wants to, and
they don't. Yeah.
They're like, well, they call him by his first name, because he doesn't really see them during the week, and then he sees them at the weekends, and even at the weekends he's only seeing them Sundays.
Yeah.
And that's an extreme example, but we probably also know examples of people, including in our families, who have worked so much that it's been a factor in the breakdown of their relationship. There's a brilliant book by Clayton M. Christensen called How Will You Measure Your Life? And, one of the things he highlights is that, he went to, might have been Harvard or at least a very reputable university. And as he went to the reunions, he saw that initially people were extremely successful and they've got these beautiful wives and, or husbands, and that they've got these amazing jobs and they're moving up the career ladder and so on. But after about the fourth decade of reunions or whatever, suddenly some of them are on their own and have lost their relationships, and some are in prison, and some have lost it all, and some have committed suicide and so on. Or some are just so unhealthy that that their bodies are giving up.
Yeah.
And he just reflects on the fact that intelligence doesn't prevent that. It's these are incredibly intelligent, and as he highlights, not just academically intelligent, but well-rounded people. You don't get into these universities just by being intelligent. But the problem is that we tend to get the goals wrong, and we tend to prioritize a particular thing and say, well, at the end of the rainbow, then the dreams will come true. And I think actually you have to start living the dream now.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it's the whole society's built around creating this success, and we're only starting, I think, in recent years to start talking about what you want and how you build that in now, as you say. There's so many people who, in the last, say, 10 years since I've had my own business, who were talking about, business stuff. They had certain products, they had certain things that they were doing. And in the last year, they've been, a bit like I am, they've been coming out with, how to simplify your life, how to be mindful, how to really take time to appreciate what you've got, rather than be sort of constantly trying to get something in the future, as you say. And I think it's a bit of a sign of the times for sure, and it will become even more a popular topic. It's just whether people can let themselves really truly appreciate where they are, rather than, as you say, it's one thing to have goals and want to be doing something different in the future, but to not, stop and actually realize how good things are now. As you say, it's just putting it all off and then finding out that it wasn't quite what you expected it to be anyway, sort of thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that I reflect on every day as part of my visualization exercise. Because one of the things about visualization is it's meant to be thinking ahead. Imagine your perfect day, imagine your perfect life. In fact, there's a book by Tony Robbins' son, Jarek Robbins, called Live It. And in that he describes identify your perfect day, because the more you bring that to life in your head, the closer you'll get to actually achieving it in your life. And that's something that's definitely occurred to me, is when I was starting to visualize it, I realized that 80% of it is achievable just by doing it. So, for example, part of my visualization is, my perfect day actually does start off with getting up early and doing my miracle morning, and then it's about having breakfast with my son. And so, like this morning, like most mornings, I sit in our living room and feeding my son. Well, I cooked 3 boiled eggs. He's not even 2 yet. Yeah. He ate 2 1/4 of them. Right? I cooked them for us to share. The first time I gave it to him, he ate like half an egg, then one egg, and it's just gone up and up. I'm literally having no breakfast now. But that's part of my perfect day.
Yes.
Part of my perfect day is getting to spend that time because my wife, wants to, get ready for work and so on, and that I don't, feel the need to do that much. So a quick shower and get changed enough for me. And as a result, I get that really good quality time baked into my life through visualizing it and saying that's what I want, and then creating it a reality.
And then it's about appreciating that, isn't it? And the fact that you're spending that time to think about those things, is presumably giving you that chance to appreciate it. I think quite often we have these experiences and we don't realise and we don't think and we don't reflect on the fact that, I'm not naturally a reflector, but I think it's so important to do that, to be, to firstly be in the moment, but also to think back about those moments that you've had, so that you can see that you are doing the things that you want to do. So, that really leads us to the last question, which is about, when you end the day knowing that you've had the chance to live more, and I talk about that being, doing the stuff you really want to do, not the things that you need to do or you feel like you should do. So I'm really interested to find out, what would you have done? And I guess in some ways that's because when you talk sometimes about rituals and, things like your miracle morning and so on, in some ways you could argue that's a sort of a should, because you've sort of planned it in. But it sounds to me that it isn't a should to you, it's a want, and it is part of that thing that you want to do. So what would that day look like? And does it include all those things that you're doing from a success point of view as well, if you like?
So definitely, I think as you say, it isn't a should for me. It isn't. I never look at things like reading books. I'm a big listener of audiobooks. I listen to probably 2 audiobooks a week. I'm getting through over 100 a year. And so, but I never look at those as things that I should do. The things that I want to do, the things I enjoy doing. And so time spent on those is valuable, and I really enjoy it. I think for me, a super successful day where I really feel like, that was just amazing, is where I've got the balance quite nicely right. And I don't mean that as a struggle. I mean that I've just managed to make sure that I've had that time in the morning, done some physical exercise, had some really good quality time with my son and with my wife, that I've thought strategically about what I want to do with my businesses, and cleared off some of my annoying actions that that might not excite me very much, but they make me feel good because it's it's the eating the frog stuff. And then it's beyond that. It's the epiphany moments. It's the moments in the day where you're able to take a step back and look, in my case, at a particular business and say, what would be the biggest thing that I could do, or what would have the biggest impact on the success of my customers, or the ability for my business to succeed in the long term, or whatever, and coming up with an idea, or just the start of an idea that could be effective. And so yesterday's a really good example where I had essentially a half-day session with my business partner Paddy, who you've met, who I work with on Spider Gap, where we were planning. Okay, we've just done a major release. Customers are absolutely loving it. What's our second? What's the difficult second album? What's the what's the next thing that we wow them with? What do we do? And taking the time to do that and come up with some really good answers meant that at the end of the day I was buzzing, and my wife comes through the door and I'm working really hard to ask her about her day and find out about what happened at nursery for my son and do all of that. But I'm absolutely itching to say, I've got to tell you this. This is what happened. This customer's doing this, and I'm helping them do. Yeah, that for me, that's an amazing day. That's when I feel like I've lived more. The other thing is that I think some people have a big desire to do adrenaline or exciting things or visit interesting places or whatever. They want to jump out of a plane. They want to go to Chile. They want to go and run with a tribe or whatever. And those, if that's your goal, if that's what you want to do, brilliant, absolutely. I think in many ways my tastes and my goals are more simple. And so for me, an amazing day might just be that I've managed to clear off a task list, think about how I can be more successful, and at the same time as all that, go for a walk where I then go and have lunch and do some of my work at the wine bar. And it's like, that is living the dream for me. Because I wouldn't be able to do that if I wasn't working from home and owning my own businesses. But I also wouldn't be able to do that if I wasn't successful and in control of my life. Because I would see that as, I would be racked with guilt. I would feel like I need to be chained to my desk, and so that it's in those moments that I realise that I'm properly achieving freedom in those moments.
It's interesting. I was at the train station coming home from a meeting in London about 1:30 in the afternoon a couple of days ago, and I just looked around the train station and thought, a bit like you did, this is living the dream, which was just like so rubbish because I was in a train station. I just fully appreciated the fact that I was going home, and actually if I got home and didn't do any more work for the day, it didn't matter. Nobody was going to pick me up on it. I'd done something useful already that day, and it was the middle of the day, and I was, doing what I was determining to do rather than what somebody else was determining for me, sort of thing.
I'm glad you explained that, because for me and pretty much everyone listening, we were all wondering why a train station was living the dream. I can definitely identify with that feeling of, yes, I'm going home early and no one else cares.
No, and nobody knows where I am, and nobody cares. Exactly.
It's brilliant.
Yes, it was just a moment in time. I think the train station was irrelevant to the story, really, but it's where I was at the time.
Exactly. It was the journey, not the destination.
Excellent.
Yeah. I guess I sometimes get that. This is me showing off now. But
go on.
I rarely do so I'll take the opportunity. I was running a workshop with a senior marketing team for a big company, and for part of this workshop as part of an offsite, and they're running it on the 34th floor of the Shard. That was awesome. That was like running a workshop there with a view, when you're standing at a flip chart looking over a few people and then all of London.
Yes.
that felt pretty good. So that's another example of feeling like I'm living the dream.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Excellent. So Alexis, I keep wanting to call you Alex. Alexis. I've known you so long now. Why do I do that?
That's all right. My mother calls me Alex.
Does she? And she gave you the name, presumably. Oh.
Yeah, so that's a whole different podcast. We could go into the 4 different reasons that my mother gives for calling me Alexis. 4 completely separate reasons, none of them more believable than the other. Nothing to do with dynasty, one to do with a Russian prince, one to do with Noah, one to do with the meaning, and a different. We'll do it in a different interview.
Yeah, okay. But I'm glad to hear that at the end of all of that, she still doesn't call you it. Funny. So, Alexis, how can people find out more about you and connect with you?
Sure. So, probably one of the easiest ways is to jump on Twitter and find me. I'm at Alexis Kingsbury. The other way to perhaps have a look at some of the stuff I'm writing is at www.makinggreatness.com, where you can find my blog and my ideas around and suggestions of case studies around how to create A-player teams and create really good, happy teams within your organizations. And also, you can feel free to email me. I'm alexis@makinggreatness.com. So
Brilliant.
Happy to hear from anyone and willing to share war stories around when your miracle morning stops working or whatever. Happy to discuss those too. So
yeah. Oh, that's great. That's one question I didn't ask you. I shouldn't throw them in at the end. But what about if things don't go right in your day? Go on. A few lines on that. It all sounds so wonderful, you see. I just thought, we can't have days where it all goes wrong.
Oh no, I definitely do. I've got two options for the answer for this. One that makes me sound ridiculously weird and geeky, a bit like earlier on in this interview, Yeah, in for a penny, in for a pound. Right. So, what if I catch it? I.e., if it's like 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 1 p.m. or whatever, and I realise I've had a really inefficient day. I've not eaten that frog. I've not done the exercise or whatever. If I catch it, I will talk to myself out loud.
Okay.
It's a little bit like the coaching thing. I'll just I think it's like a pattern break, which I believe comes from the word of NLP and Darren Brown and so on.
Yeah.
It's something that I would normally never do, and I just did it once where I was like, oh, Alexis, you haven't done anything productive this morning, and then just a brief conversation that just helps me to remind myself.
To yourself as well. Now that is the mad bit.
It's less conversational than that, but it's more of a reminder of getting me back to the goal and getting me back to why do I do anything? Why don't I just go and sit outside? If I've been sat on my desk basically doing nothing, then that needs like you would with I suppose it's almost like I'm replacing my employer. It's like as an employee, if that got spotted by an employer and they're like, "Come on, John, what have you done?" They'd talk about it, but they'd coach you back into it. They'd remind you of why you're doing what you're doing, and hopefully help you to break down the tasks and therefore commit to it. And that helps me, and I recommit to it to do it. It's a little bit like being your own boss.
Yes.
If I don't catch it and I get to the end of the day and it sucks, then it's my wife and my son. When they turn up, I realise that it doesn't really matter, and that I can spend time with them. If it's a really bad day, then I probably just need to watch comedy and not think about anything and talk about anything for a bit. But otherwise, just spending time with them, talking to them, overcomes most of that. I think that's probably the key takeaway from this. This is probably, rather than try and focus on a particular part of your life to succeed in, like business or fitness or whatever at a time, you do need to paint that visualization of what you'd like your day to be, and then try and live it as closely as you can, and try and remember that there are some things that are just really important to you, and as long as they happen, it kind of, nothing else kind of matters. And time with family is probably top of the list. So I think that helps.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm glad I did ask that. I don't know why I didn't before, but we've got a different order for this podcast. But there we go. So thank you, Alexis. Really appreciate it. So many resources in that interview. So I've got my work cut out now trying to find links to them all. I really appreciate you sharing all that geekiness, which I don't think is geekiness. I think it will sound brilliant.
Good. Well, I'll go and compile a reading list of those books, plus a couple of others that I perhaps alluded to but didn't mention by name, and get those over to you as well.
That would be brilliant. Thank you. Really helpful.
You're welcome.
Joe's Gems.
This is the part of the show where I do a recap of the key points of the interview, the stuff that I really liked, and the apps, books, music, tips and tools that were shared. This is for you if you heard something that you want to check out but you couldn't write it down at the time. Hopefully I've got you covered. And this is the bit for the really time pressed. You can just listen here and get the gems from the interview, but of course I wouldn't suggest you do that and miss out on the great conversation that I had with Alexis. Of course, all this information is available on the show notes on the website at powertolivemore.com/6. So we talked about the iThoughts app, which is a mind mapping application. Alexis said it's probably the best app and most powerful app that I use, and it's the one I'm asked about most often when I'm at conferences because I take all my notes into iThoughts. MyFitnessPal is the app to track fitness and food, tracking things like meals, calories and exercise. Alexis talked about using the WordPress app for blogging straight into your blog from your phone or your tablet. And he talked about Intercom, which is a platform that he uses in one of his businesses to communicate with his customers. He said, I have an application called Intercom, which is used by my software business for one of our support tech teams, so I can keep an eye on what conversations people are having. And like me, he uses Buffer for scheduling his tweets. Some of the other resources we talked about were people that Alexis admires. So that was people like Richard Branson and Robert Kiyosaki from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Alexis recommended quite a few books. One of the ones that we talk about a lot when we get together for our conversations is Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, which essentially sets out 6 activities for you to do every morning that sort of set you up for the day. We mentioned a couple of times Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. We talked also about Live It by Jarek Robbins, who is Tony Robbins' son. Alexis says, in the book it says to identify your perfect day, because the more you bring that to life in your head, the closer you'll get to actually achieving it in your life. And another book was How Will You Measure Your Life by Clayton M. Christensen. And one of the things he highlights is that he went to a very reputable university, and as he went to reunions he saw that initially people were extremely successful, but after about the 4th decade of those reunions, suddenly some of them were on their own, they'd lost their relationships, some were in prison, some had lost everything, some had committed suicide and so on. And he was reflecting on the fact that intelligence doesn't prevent that happening. And the problem is we tend to get our goals wrong, and we tend to prioritise a particular thing. At the end of the rainbow, the dreams will come true. And Alexis was saying that he thinks actually you have to start living the dream now, not thinking that something will happen in 10, 20, 30 years' time, because, it's probably too late by that time. Some of the tips that Alexis shared, firstly, was about Eat the Frog, which Brian Tracy talked about, which was doing the worst thing you need to get done on a day in the morning. So that's out of the way, presumably after doing your Miracle Morning. And he said he's got it as part of his visioning in the morning, that he makes sure that he's gone to bed before 11 in the evening. And from Think and Go Rich, he talked about having invented a council of people who he'd most like as coaches, alive or dead, that you know enough about, perhaps by reading autobiographies of them or knowing them through whatever means, so that you can sort of see yourself getting advice from those people, so through their lens, which I thought was quite a nice way of sort of self-coaching, if you like. He talks about using the question, what could I meaningfully do today, this week, this month to achieve something? So using it for sort of short and long-term means to ensure that work is meaningful and taking you to wherever you plan to be, rather than just being busy on that day. He talked about relative prioritisation being really important, so what is most important at any given time, and using time blocking on your calendar to achieve the tasks and reach goals, and planning and ensuring that the right stuff gets done so that there's no guilt of not achieving what needs to be done. And then we talked a bit about how he bakes exercise into his life, so not sort of adding it on as this sort of crazy add-on at the end of the day when you're too tired to go, or you're going to run in the mornings when you don't want to, or you're going to do Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then you do that and you don't see your family. So he's actually built it in so that it's part of his sort of working day, so that it's not an add-on that sort of gets in the way of other things. So if it's something that's really important, that you actually bake that into your system, process and routine to make sure that it happens. And then we talked a bit about if Alexis has had a really inefficient day, or if he's not eaten the frog or not done the exercise or whatever, and if he catches himself, he'll talk to himself out loud. He says it's a bit like a pattern break coming from the world of NLP. So, starting with, Alexis, you haven't done anything productive this morning because whatever, and having that sort of conversation with himself, which was, very revealing for him to share. But also I think, it's working for him, and certainly something that might be useful to you too. And so to contact Alexis, you can follow him on Twitter. You can look at his Making Greatness website with the blog on there, or you can email him at alexis@makinggreatness.com.
Use your power to live more.
If you're interested in keeping in touch and getting my weekly newsletter with my fairly eclectic mix of hints, tips and useful apps and tools that you can use in your business and in your home life, then please go to powertolivemore.com/subscribe, and you'll get access to some great resources to help you in your quest to live more. And don't forget to go to powertolivemore.com/6 to find all the links from the show, and I look forward to speaking to you next time.